Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. This week, a frequent guest here on Straight Talk, Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish, shared sad news with the community. He's been diagnosed with abdominal cancer and is facing the battle of his life. And he's doing it with courage and determination and inspiring us all. Here's my interview with Commissioner Nick Fish. Commissioner Fish, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me in, Laurel.
You shared some really difficult news with your staff and the entire community today. What can you tell us about that news and your diagnosis?
Well, sure. So Tuesday, my doctors at the Knight Cancer Institute told me that I have cancer of the abdomen. And it's like stomach cancer, but a little different. Last week, I had a CT scan, which is, gives you a chance to sort of take a picture, a snapshot of your stomach. And it came back with a lot of red flags. And so I was summoned to come in to see a doctor the next day. This past Monday, they opened me up in my stomach to take some samples to harvest some of the fluids and the tissues so they could do a biopsy. By Tuesday, they determined that I had cancer. And starting next week, they're gonna give me chemotherapy and a very intensive regime of chemotherapy. And we're going to fight this thing tooth and nail.
How tough was it for you at that time to hear the news?
You know, I'm a middle-aged guy who is in great health, you know, and I kind of pride myself on staying healthy, eating right. I have a wonderful life. I have a life that's so much better than I deserve. It feels like someone just sort of snuck in the back door and tried to upend everything. Now, I have had symptoms for a while, and one of the things that I hope to share with people is to carefully monitor your own symptoms. I've lost a ton of weight, and it was okay to lose a little bit of weight, but I've lost an unusual amount of weight. I lost my appetite, and that got me in trouble at home because my wife is a great cook, and I just wasn't hungry at night. I started being fatigued, and I ran out of gas early. And then I started having pretty significant stomach pain. And all of those individually, you know, may not be cause for concern, but in the totality, they said there's a problem. And when I had the CT scan, that's when we knew it was a real problem. It's the fear of the unknown that I think it causes the most stress. The two hardest things, to be honest with you, that I've had to deal with is not knowing what the future will bring, and then having to tell my kids.
Well, that must have been hard.
That was the hardest.
And especially your son, you said.
So I have two wonderful children. Not one is 24 years old, no longer a child, she's a young woman. But I have a 13-year-old at home. He had just come back from camp, and he had been away for a couple of weeks. It was very difficult to sit down and share this news because we knew it would be very upsetting, and there's not a lot we could share with him other than to have confidence in our doctors and in the path ahead that we're going to take as a family. My son is much older than his years, and he insisted in our first meeting to be included in all the future doctor's appointments and meetings so that he could be there. And it speaks to how grounded he is and how loving he is that he wants to share this journey with his dad.
And I've met them. They are wonderful children.
I am very lucky.
Why did you feel it was important at this point to share this with the public? Well,
in part, I'm at a point where people have come up to me and said, "Are you okay?" I've lost about 30 pounds. And I'm also starting to spend more time in the hospital. And, you know, while I'm not, you know, as well known as you are in the public sphere.
Well, probably more well known.
You know, when you start spending time in the hospital and you're in the cancer floors, it's going to get out sooner than later. And also, one of the things I've learned about cancer, like a lot of diseases, is people often struggle with these diseases on their own, in isolation. And historically, there's even shame attached to some of these diseases. Well, what we know is the best way to fight these diseases is to bring your family and friends together as part of your support group. And so I wanted people to know that I'm facing this big fight. I wanted them to know that it's going to have some impact on my day job. There may be some days I can't come to work and I'm recovering from the treatment. But I also wanted them to know that I feel loved and supported, and we're going to fight this together. And no one should feel isolated in dealing with a severe illness. And as I learned today, there are a lot of people in my corner, and I feel very blessed.
What's the reaction been like? Just this morning when I looked at your Facebook feed, because you put a statement there, there were hundreds of comments from well-wishers. What's the response been like? You know,
people in my family I haven't heard from years, elected officials, community members, even people that didn't care for me, you know, sort of I don't care for Nick, but I wish him well, you know. What I have seen here is the best of our community. People rallying to, you know, my fight and offering their support. And that speaks to the best of Portland. And, you know, you and I have witnessed in the last 6 months a lot of discouraging things in our community. Divisions and people feeling off balance and many things that aren't so inspiring. So for me, to get this kind of outpouring of love and support has been very reaffirming of kind of the spirit of Portland. And frankly, I'm going to need this support as I go through the treatment, because the kind of things they prescribe for me are toxic and have a lot of terrible side effects. I'll just share one joke with you. As the guy was explaining all the side effects, I said, please don't tell me that I'll lose the rest of my hair, because people know I've been losing my hair over the last few years. He goes, no, I think the medicine we're going to give you, what's left of your hair is fine. And the doctor who told me this was bald, so it added even more humor. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky people. I have health insurance. Think of all the people that don't have health insurance and confront an unexpected illness like this and are facing the prospect of bankruptcy. I have access to the best health care in the world.
The Knight Institute?
Knight Cancer Institute, and that's covered under my health insurance. And thanks to Mr. Knight's generosity and OHSU's place in the world, I have the best doctors that you can find. And then I have a very loving family and support group and wide circle of friends who are booing me during this. And so, you know, as bleak as I might feel sometimes, I have to tell you, I also feel very blessed by the kinds of help that I'm getting through this struggle.
And you start these treatments on Monday?
Yeah, next Monday they're going to put a valve in my chest that links up with a vein so they can put the chemicals right into my system. And then later in the week I have my first chemotherapy session. And I'll be going in every couple of weeks to get intravenous drugs, and I'll also be taking drugs orally. And we'll see whether they make a difference. And if not, they'll prescribe something else. And we really won't know for the first few months what's working and what isn't, but they'll be experimenting and hoping to find something that pushes back on this kind of aggressive cancer I have in my abdomen.
And you plan to continue working through this?
The two most important things in my life are my public service and my family, and probably not in that order. And they're what give me great joy and purpose in my life. I want to continue my public service and do it as long as I can, and I want to be present, you know, for my kids and my wife. And so we'll make some adjustments, but I think the most important thing is getting back to normal. And that's what I hear from a lot of cancer survivors, and I've heard from many of them today, that it was very important to get back to that new normal. That this is a different kind of journey, and it has lots of twists and turns, but the more you get to normal, the better, and it keeps you strong as you deal with all the setbacks along the way.
Are the doctors encouraging about your prognosis?
Yeah, you know, the doctors generally present the cup half full narrative in this stuff, and I think that's partly because they want you to stay strong. Mm-hmm. If you look at the statistics on the kind of cancer I have, you know, there are some people that don't do so well, but I'm not a statistic. I am a unique person with a unique a set of conditions, and my treatment will be unique. So the aggregate data doesn't tell you much about my future, and my hope is that if we get in front of this now and we do all the hard work, that I'll be able to manage this disease. And I have so many things left in my life that I want to accomplish. And I was kidding my daughter, I want to see her get married someday. I want to see my son Chapin play high school soccer, and there's so much I want to do in my public service. So I'm going to fight this thing as hard as I can, and I want to extend my life as long as I can.
You're up for re-election next year, and
Correct.
You've told us on Straight Talk that you plan to run for re-election.
Before I first announced it.
Thank you for doing that. At this point in your life, do you have thoughts about that now?
You know, we're gonna consider the impact of the treatment on my campaign, you know, at some point. I thought today it was important to tell the people that I serve that I have this struggle, this battle, this disease, and they have rewarded me with more love and support than anyone deserves. After I've done some of my treatment, and I'll have a sense of how I can balance the different things in my life, in a perfect world, I would be able to go through my treatment regime, serve on the council, and stand for re-election. And after all, you and I know many people who have illnesses that they manage their entire life with a lot of courage and determination. So that's my preference, is to be able to do all of that, but we'll make a decision later when we find out what the impact is of the treatment.
Well, your courage, determination, and admiration. I have such admiration for your attitude. Is there a message that you have for the community that you'd like to share now?
Well, yes. Boy, I've learned so much in the last week. And once I kind of got over my own shock, first of all, cancer remains one of the top 4 killers in America. It's amazing, after all the progress we think we've made, too many people die of cancer. And so much of cancer, it turns out, is preventable. Now, I don't have lung cancer or lifestyle cancer, so that's good. But I guess the one thing I would say to people is pay attention to your symptoms. You know, the reason that people often don't get early intervention is because they're not reading their symptoms and they're managing their symptoms. For me, it took a cascade of all these things hitting me at once, where finally my wife said, enough's enough, and she forced the subject. But pay attention to those things that are happening. Number 2, and this, you know, was something that I think is sort of a credo that both of us have, is live every day like it's your last. And I've had that. You know, when I was young, my mother died in a car accident when I was very young, and it threw my world upside down. And I think because of that, I've never taken anything for granted in my life. I've always treated every day as a blessing, and I've always tried to give 110%. Well, this is another reminder to me that you never take anything for granted. And I guess the third thing is, think of all the wasted time we spend in our life on the stupid stuff. Mm-hmm. And it sometimes consumes us. And what really matters? You know, what really matters is the work we do, the legacy we leave, the friendships we build, the children that we nurture. And if it doesn't fall into one of those categories, why are we wasting our time on it? And so I will redouble my focus on the stuff that matters. I'll continue to try to serve. This is the greatest honor of my life, being in public service. And I will never take for granted the blessings I have in my life.
Nick Fish, thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for your service to the community. I know I speak for the entire community when I tell you that we're all rooting for you, and you and your family are in our thoughts and prayers, and we know you're going to make it through this.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you. He is the epitome of courage, grace, and class, and we wish him all the very best. Thank you once again to my guests, Oregon Congressman Kurt Schrader and Commissioner Fish. And thank you for watching. Join us next week when my guest is Senator Ron Wyden. We'll see you then for Straight Talk.